Join the Wide Whale team May 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern for part 1 of our 3-part virtual event series, Voice of the Resident, where we will look at the tour and move-in lifecycle stages. We've built a data set of 400,000 Google reviews from residents of hundreds of top multifamily groups, including the NMHC Top 50. Using AI and topic sentiment analysis, get a unique perspective on resident preferences. Go to widewhale.com/data to sign up or find it on the revised community. That's widewhale.com/data.
Good morning and welcome to Multifamily Collective. I wanted to set up a context for this episode that I'm releasing today with Stephen Ray. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. And the reason it's a 2-part series is because the interview went for over an hour, almost an hour and a half. So I wanted to break it up into 2 parts, but I wanted to give you a little bit of context as it relates to the second piece in case you didn't catch the first piece. We talk about a ton of stuff in this particular episode. We talk about KPIs and how they can be problematic. We talk about reimagining job roles and responsibilities in the age of AI and the age of automation, the age of centralization. And we talk about the fact that we have way too many dashboards. There are just too many dashboards for the multifamily industry. We talk about how software plays a significant role in resident satisfaction, in team member satisfaction. We go all the way down the path of dynamically distributed labor or labor distribution, where we have very sophisticated algorithms that are directing our days, especially on the service side of our business, where people might be in a centralized scenario and they're moving from property to property. You want to know that the traffic patterns out there are lending well to, individuals that are maybe closer to an asset and have inventory, or somebody that might be further away doesn't have inventory, so on and so forth. It's jam-packed. Stephen is so passionate about the multifamily industry and he has so many great ideas. We just couldn't find a good stopping point. I imagine that we could have gone another hour. It could have been like Joe Rogan length type podcast. So anyway, grab your favorite beverage, sit back, relax, and enjoy this second part of a 2-part series with Stephen Ray.
Well, and that kind of speaks to the how is it being automated, right? Like maybe there's something there you could unearth. But we also, I'm going super like tagline-y, but I also read this really interesting book called The Tyranny of Metrics that talks about how KPIs just destroy everything. If you want to see why a business failed, like look at their KPIs, because that's probably a big part of it. Because humans like to win. So when we're given a goal, we optimize around that goal. But what if that's not the actual goal? What if that's a goal that, as a middle manager, I just created manifested out of thin air to like track this thing? I know of companies that have like legitimately like made up metrics, like they just made up a formula for this thing, but the only metric that matters is NOI, period. Like there's not another one at the property that actually matters. There's others that contribute. And that if you're doing it right, but then I've seen properties where like the whole on-site staff's getting bonuses, but the owner's losing money.
Right.
It's like how does that make sense? It's like, well, they worked really hard. It's like, well, that's not why you give bonuses.
Right.
Like effort is implied in having a job. Like bonuses are for extraordinary performance, not ordinary. Right. And so I think there's some stuff like. So this is what happens when I start taglining too much, is I get lost on that tagline. So that came up because how you fix it, right? So I think the KPIs drive some of that. Because if everyone's looking at NOI and understands how what they're doing impacts NOI, and NOI is win or lose, well then you're naturally introducing some of that, right? Like that's what I think would surface out of that process. Not to toot my kind of debut employer. Roscoe RPM's horn too much in this, but our site manager bonuses were NOI, period. There was no like compliance and like just NOI, because that's where we wanted their focus, and it seemed to serve us pretty well for a while, or at least the entire time I was there. And that's I think getting back to some of that helps, right? And then to your point, some people just haven't been taught it. Everyone has a different aptitude for different things, so. fixing the job roles also allows for some specialization
Sure.
that we don't have. Tracking back a little bit here, if we'd like knowledge graph this podcast, it'd be all over the place. But
yeah, that's right. And that's okay.
But I think the job roles and responsibilities are a big culprit to some of this. Like, and again, leasing being the entry level job makes no sense. But then when you move from leasing to an accounting role, since sales and accounting are like complementary skills in most people, right? Like, as someone who's kind of like a salesperson at heart, like, and you could not like, I had a startup with one of the things where I was like, I can handle the accounting. I handled it for like 6 months, and then like my brain was tired of it. I wanted to do other stuff. They're just not the same personality types in most cases.
That's right.
And then we flip them to property manager, which is even like has to be like some weird hybrid blend. And it's why I think our best salespeople get stolen by vendors, right? All the time.
That's
like,
right.
Because they're at the properties like, you're really good. Like, you want to come make real money in sales? Like, come work for us. Because we don't have a career path for sales that allows you to grow as a salesperson. But then we miss out on like a bunch of people who could be really good assistant managers or PMs just because they don't have a sales thing. Right. And they burn out at leasing because that's not their skill set.
That's right.
So I think I think reimagining the job roles and having your entry level position being some sort of admin where you can learn, cut your teeth. It's customer service. It's answering phone calls, or and just understanding kind of the flow of how things operate. Like, learn the lease, go shop your comps, like learn the market. Know where everything is, and then earn your way into a sales role. Because sales should be a destination. But then that also means that someone who doesn't have the sales itch could just go straight to something else and not necessarily have to take that detour. And I think that aligns talent better, which will then allow more people to operate in their genius zone. And I wish that was me. That's a Dr. Debbie, or Dr. Debbie may have stolen it from someone too, but that's what I learned that from Dr. Debbie. But to operate in their genius zone where they actually like feel good about what they're doing. Because people know, like, when you're at a property that's like collections are 78%, your occupancy is 85%, like, you're failing. No matter what, like, you're saying or you're told, like, it's very clear that you're failing. And that feels like shit, and that's why people quit.
That's right.
They don't want to fail.
That I have to segue here because I read this on your LinkedIn, that last remark that you made about why people leave. They're not satisfied and they leave. You put out a poll on your LinkedIn page. I can't remember if it was your personal page or on the other page, but it had to do with software and how software contributes to employee satisfaction. And it was interesting to me. It's why people leave. 67% of the people that responded, I don't know how many people responded, but 67% of people leave because they're not satisfied with the organization, and it is a result of software. You also put out another poll that sort of corresponds with this, in that, how many dashboards are you looking at?
Yeah. But, I mean, that's
that for us.
I'm fortunate to mentor some people in the business, and several of whom are still on site and PM roles for the most part. And I called one of them up, and I was exploring this idea, because when I was on site, there was one, right? Like, ILSs hadn't really become a thing yet. There was like early day. We were still in like the books that were at like, the grocery store, for the For Rent mag and that sort of stuff.
That's where I met my wife.
And really,
she was a rent rep.
Okay, for rent rep. Okay. I was like, I thought you were both reaching for like the book at the same time at the grocery store, and your hands touched, and like it was magic. And but there wasn't a bunch of different things to do. Like, the job was hard because you had to know a lot to do it well, but it was pretty straightforward, right? You didn't have to juggle a whole bunch of stuff. And I was talking to this gentleman, Cole, and it's like, what's your computer desktop look like? It's like, well, I got like 11 tabs open, and 4 of them are emails that I got pulled away from and haven't gotten back to, and one's apartments.com because I was checking rents to make sure they're right, but I didn't have a chance to finish. And then there's my like PMS, and then there's customer satisfaction portal. Like, and I was like, all right, so you get nothing done. Like basically is what you're telling me is you have a plan and then your plan ends by 9:07, and then at the end of the day you're like, what did I do?
Right.
And you don't feel like you actually did anything. And we have this weird thing in the business where everyone's like, especially on site, like, how's it going? It was busy. It's super busy. But then what are they actually doing?
Right.
And they're doing things. I don't doubt that they're not working, but it's like, what are they working on? Are those things that move things forward? And I think dashboards in general, like going back to that KPI kind of idea of the tyranny of metrics, that's based on a law by this gentleman named Goodhart, who was an economist in London in the 70s. And Goodhart's law states when something becomes a target, or when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Interesting.
And then this whole book, Tyranny of Metrics, was built around that. I think we have way too many dashboards. Like, who uses dashboards?
So
who
true.
actually looks at it and says, like, that graph just told me something that's going to help me make a decision today. Like, they're pretty.
Yeah.
They're not pragmatic. Like, they're not actionable. Like, we have all this data that's not actionable at all. And then we give it to people who we haven't trained to know how to make it actionable. And we say, make a decision, take an action.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the dashboards are a big thing. I'm a big Steve Jobs, Apple honk in general, but I think there's something to be said for Entrada's approach, or I'm trying to have that was Yardi's approach for the longest time, right? Where everything was kind of under this one. We built it all. It's all kind of coming up our thing.
Right.
And then we have all these fragmented products that just they're solutions looking for a problem. And then we miss out on some that I think are amazing that I can't believe that not everyone has this. I'll plug a friend of mine's company. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Rent Grata.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in Ben.
Yep.
If I could only have one leasing tool at a property, and CRM was included in that list, it would still be Rent Grata.
Wow. Tell us why.
Because it's what sales is, right? Like, this is the biggest decision people make in their lives. It's where they live.
Right.
Like shelter. It's the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not. So I actually have a video I'm working on. I hope I get done today. It might push a bit, called Home, that talks about why what we do is unique and special.
Yeah.
Because we deal with people's homes. It's not a TV that you order on Amazon. It's okay if it's a day later. If it ships broken, you send it back. No, this is your house. This is your castle.
Yeah.
So it's different. And too many lost the plot there a minute. What was where was I? Oh yeah. So what prospects want to hear from, you're selling a lifestyle, right? You're not just selling the sticks and bricks. You're not selling. My mentor Angelique used to say we sell time in a box, which is very true.
Yeah.
Because a day gone is a day gone forever, and I can never get that day back.
Right.
But I can also only sell it once. So if I sell it for the wrong price, I'm trapped into that wrong price, which is where the art comes in. And I speak in Angelique half the time when I'm talking about multifamily stuff, because I learned so much from that woman. But the idea of we sell time in a box, it kind of evolved to now we actually sell the lifestyle around the box, right? Even if you're suburban, it's not all downtown urban high rise walkability. There's a lifestyle everywhere, and people are accepting that lifestyle when they come to lease. Well, who's going to know that lifestyle better than anyone? The people who live there.
That's right. That's right.
And Zach and Ben's coolest insight to me is that they have these profile archetypes of this person, works from home and has a dog and likes to exercise. This person loves the nightlife and takes the transit. And so you can find a person who is kind of like you and ask them questions, and their conversions are crazy, right? For people who go through that process.
Right.
And we do terrible jobs with CRMs.
Yeah.
Partly because we don't teach people sales, so they don't even know what they're a pipeline. What is that? They don't really know how to use it. And it's usually garbage in, garbage out. It's not good data. It's almost never good data. So it's kind of useless versus just the old prospect tracker. Okay, it's automating some emails going out. But if the leasing person isn't like putting in like what actually happened and like the notes that make a CRM valuable,
Right.
And Rent Grata like cuts out all of that. Like on the website, talk to a resident. Hey, you toured. Do you want me to? Hey, I'm gonna send you a follow-up email. Do you want to go talk to a resident in that? Because I'll include a link. Like,
Yeah.
that's so simple and so genius. Like, the first time I saw that, I was like, what? It was right before I actually met Zach. I was on a property here in a lease up in Austin. I was like, what is this widget? I've never seen this before. And like, clicked on it, and I talked to like 4 residents at that property. That I like borrowed someone's phone at one point to, because I was so fascinated by the insight of saying, yeah, people want to hear from the people who live there.
Yeah.
They don't want to know. Humans don't like being sold.
Right?
Oh,
so true. So true.
Like I remember when I was on site, I actually told a lot of people like, this probably isn't the place for you, because I'd ask them like, what are you looking for? They'd tell me, and I'd say, we don't really have a couple of things you said are really important. I still would love to show you, but you go to this property down the street, and they have everything you're looking for.
Yeah.
And I would get referrals from those people who didn't even end up leasing with me.
Right.
Because I was more focused on the value to the individual than the deal, and the deals came. Which is to me what sales is. That's what you get with a resident, right? Like, they're going to give you unfiltered, they're not going to run it down because there is an incentive there, and angry people aren't going to opt into that. So like, for every chance they can to like tell someone not to lease here.
Right.
If they did, you could probably figure it out pretty quick. Like, on the whole, these are people who are probably pretty happy. They're going to be net promoters. Like, that's your ideal sales interaction.
That's right.
But most people don't think about it that way, right? They're like, we have a CRM that sends automatic emails, like, to who?
Again, we've taken out this sort of critical thinking component of a CRM and what it is actually for. It's not a place to put data in. It's a place to put useful data in that you can make decisions on later, or keep other people informed who are part of the sales process in case you have a day off or whatever.
Well, and to be fair, I didn't know what a CRM was until I like got to use one, and I had someone teach me, right? Which to me is like the big thing is, I have a really hard time assigning blame to individuals when it's not their responsibility to have known it, like, intrinsically.
Yeah.
Right? Like, someone should have taught you better. And so that may not even be the fault of the person who's teaching you, because they may not know, because they weren't taught, right? Like, and that's something that, it's why I'm kind of I use the term broken, or like, or severely broken, because I think people are like, well, is it really? And it kind of pulls some attention to it, because it is going to be, to fix it is going to probably be pretty systemic change in terms of, how job roles are structured, the technology we use, the expectations that we have for ourselves and for our performance with residents, the visibility into the maintenance black box of like, what's happening. Like,
Right.
When I was at that small owner operator, I got curious, like, how many of our work orders are callbacks? And I was shocked that none of the management software like had a way to track that. So I built a way to track it, and it was like 18%, and I was like blown away.
Right.
Like, oh, that's why that team is drowning, is because they're not fixing something in the first place. Like, we're not actually, we're sticking bubble gum in the cracks in the dam and expecting it to hold, and that's not. So anyway, another tangent. This is gonna be might be your title, like the conversation of tangents. But like, it's not that it's just one thing, which means it's also not a silver bullet to fix it. Right? It's going to be a lot of things. We haven't had true disruption in the business, right? Like, we haven't had.
No, I think that's fair.
We've had growth. We've had new versions of tools, right? But they're all still kind of the same tool. Like, I'm real fascinated with what Central is doing. SENTRAL. They're doing a lot of the kind of higher end stuff, similar to Flow, which was the rework guys stuff. That's right. Where they're kind of going into like the higher end of the market to build some brand and to offer some additional features. I've heard Central's doing like 7 to 15% like higher NOI than like similar properties in the area, which now you're actually getting into something that might truly be differentiated.
True.
Because like, management's commoditized right now as it sits.
Yeah, that's
right?
fair.
Like everyone charges the same fees. You get roughly the same performance, at least on the high end, right?
Right.
On the low end, you could obviously still lose stuff. But even those are still kind of subtle, like attempts at it. And maybe the reason my brand went to maintenance is because I do think maintenance and brand are the two biggest opportunities in the space, and I think they go together. Um, uh, if if we could save those 1 in 6 residents who move out because they're upset with management, which is typically maintenance. And again, that's not necessarily the fault of the maintenance guys. If that's an 80s property that's 350 units and you got three guys and a porter covering it, like they're going to struggle.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the individuals; it's the process. But if you save those 1 in 6 residents who are moving, that's billions of dollars a year just in vacancy loss and term savings. Like just those two. Like not
That's
even
right.
to mention like all the other like second, third order effects of that.
That's right.
I think using NMHC's numbers from last year, I think I had that like 23 million units, 1 in 6, average was 1640, whatever it was, average days vacant of 30 days. It was like $13 billion a year.
That's
and
a big
lost
number.
revenue just from like angry people leaving.
Yeah, that's a huge number.
It's a huge number.
It's a fixable problem, right?
Exactly.
It's fixable.
If 1 in 6 of your customers is leaving and saying, I'm never coming back here, like you would think most businesses would address the cause.
That's right.
But we haven't yet. And I understand a lot of the reasons why. Our staffing model's part of that, right? The 1-to-100 ratio. I think it was before we started the recording. It's why I think centralizing maintenance is the big miss by most of these companies trying to centralize leasing, which I also agree with because that creates a maybe not in the way that some people are doing it, but that I do like centralized leasing. I'm not saying I don't, but centralized maintenance is where you can get ahead of the 1-to-100 ratio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I came up with this phrase when I was piloting the modular concept, which was our existing maintenance teams are simultaneously over and understaffed. So they're overstaffed because you're paying a lead who 2/3 of the time is probably not doing things that are commensurate with what you're paying him.
Right.
He's changing a toilet flapper, like installing a light switch plate, and like painting a wall, but we're still paying him $35 an hour, or or whatever it may happen to be.
Right.
And he's there as insurance, right, for when that big thing does break. And then, but because we have all this payroll locked up in him, then we're also like down a person maybe, like because then when we do get really busy, we don't have the labor to absorb it in a decent way. And then, like we talked about earlier, once you get behind, it's really hard to get caught back up. Exactly. Without like a triage team or someone like extra labor resources coming in. Whereas if you figure out how to centralize maintenance, and maybe there's like a shared maintenance solution, or like I've got a bunch of stuff that's kind of, I'm still playing with some ideas on like how to actually build something outside of the NMHC top 50.
Yeah.
Because right, 82% of the market's in smaller management companies.
That's right.
So like, what are the solutions for them? But that's the only way you get ahead of it, to where you could hire less leads because you don't need them as often if you were able to dynamically deploy labor to where it's needed. And it wouldn't even have to be like throughout the day. You just be like, hey, you're going here this day.
Yeah.
I don't know if you followed, Avalon Bay had a project called Conso Twinbrook. It was just outside of the DC area and it had no staff.
I know I've tracked some things that UDR is doing along those same lines. So
yeah,
different company, but same concept.
What I loved about what I stole, like just straight up, because artists are thieves. The thing I straight up stole from them I loved was they had designated days for maintenance, for non-emergency maintenance.
Huh.
So it's like Tuesday and Friday, right?
Yeah.
And that allows work orders to kind of pile up a little bit so that you can figure out how many people to send. You can send the right number of people to get the stuff done that needs to get done. You could follow up on things if it's like, how is your AC not working? Is it like blowing hot? Is it not coming out at all? You could troubleshoot all that sort of stuff. And then from what I understand, I would love to talk to someone from Avalon Bay about this actually, but the residents didn't mind because there was like a commitment. On Tuesday and Friday it gets done. I don't have to worry about it because what affects the resident is the worry and the not knowing.
Correct.
Right? It's I used to teach people on site, like if you have an AC out and you put a window unit in at this property, and this way you put a window unit in, but you call the person every day to ask how it's going, which resident feels like they were better served? Like you did the by the book thing on both,
Right.
but one of them you actually like prioritized you recognize the situation they were in, it was probably uncomfortable, and you were showing at least some care.
Right.
There's a there's a lot of that can come out of that with maintenance where you just it's assigned days and you still dispatch for emergency stuff, right? Like
Sure.
like it's an emergency. But then how does that change your staffing, right? Like, and what I was kind of penciled out and we were able to actually do in terms of not even have the right leadership in the roles, but we had a lot more maintenance guys than what you could have had. I think we were at I think we had 14 on 1,000 units. Because we had more of the lower level positions and didn't need as many as the top level ones. And then we had labor, and then we could send it around, we could try and get stuff done. And that to me is, I mean, you save those 1 to 6 residents. That's huge.
You've more than paid for that. You've more than paid for it.
Yeah, definitely. I was playing with the math that I think a lot of properties could probably just add a maintenance guy, right? Like your 60s and 70s assets, and like, yeah, we're going to run $1,800 a unit payroll, and everyone's going to lose their mind, but we're also going to probably run like 65% retention,
right?
Or 70% retention,
that's right.
Because that's also a demographic that does not like to move.
Yes.
So when they do move, you've really screwed up.
You're probably not going to save them anyway when you've really botched it.
Exactly. But if you could just do better,
yes,
with that extra kind of flex labor, they could do make ready sometimes or like whatever it is, but you just have the resource. I mean, that's like 40 grand a year on 300 something, or like 50 grand, like all baked in for burden. Like that's not a lot of money based on like a 300 unit property, what that's doing in terms of revenue. So
yeah, that's right. Well, we're coming up on an hour here. I've been curious nearly the entire time we've been on this podcast. There's a whiteboard behind you. You have some writing on it. We referred to it before we started recording, so I'm just curious, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
So those are hopefully product launch dates for our first product. So we have a interactive tour / training builder. So basically, you record your screen share, and by the time you click done, it's already produced all your training materials.
Oh, that's cool.
And having like run a training department and used Camtasia heavily, which I loved at the time. I still actually use Camtasia to edit videos sometimes. So my brain just works in Camtasia more than like Final Cut or anything else.
Sure.
But those were like brutal to like work your way through and get get the screenshots of like, here's where you click, and this just builds all of that instantly. So excited, hopefully, to have that coming. And then, I think there's, I think it's more than property management. I'm thinking about in terms of this investment real estate in multifamily. And we've got kind of what our Clayton Christensen wrote, who's an author, a Harvard professor, who wrote Innovator's Dilemma, right. This thing about like non-consumption or over-serving. And I think most properties and management companies are over-served right now with the data that they get in terms of comps.
True.
And there's a lot of insights that are like right there, like leasing velocity, for example. That's one I'll give away. Like what's the leasing velocity for one bedrooms under 800 square feet in this submarket? Like that would be really valuable, especially at pre-acquisition or like trying to figure out what's going wrong.
Right. Right.
And actually there's a company called HelloData.ai who just came out, who's doing comps, and they're doing a great job actually of it. But they came out with something I thought I was going to be the first one to come to market with, but it was future availability, right? Because if they have 12 units available, but they're all 2 bedrooms, and I have no 2-bedroom availability, I don't care, right? Like I'm not trading any traffic with them,
right?
So that's an irrelevant data point that might be influencing something that I'm doing. Whereas if there's a bunch of 1 bedrooms, all right, I need to dig my heels in. We're going to need to get creative. It's not, again, the fallacy of the roll up. I think that may be a Stevenism. I may have made that one up. But the roll ups are just super misleading. So I have a bunch of I spent my last probably 5 years in the business mostly doing biz dev, which I hate because I think I'm terrible at it. I did well, but I knew I wasn't doing the salesperson thing.
Sure.
I was just trying to provide value, which I later found out was the salesperson thing. At least of the 20% who actually do 80% of the work, they aren't doing all these 100 cold emails and but I worked a lot with owners and I was always like a pricing theory nut because I wanted to get in people's heads that it's all guessing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the cool thing about the product we sell is I can change the rent tomorrow. Like I can change what it sells for. If I'm like a retail store, like it's hard for me to mark down stuff.
Right.
Right. It's not static. But we're also not like flights or hotels where like people know like Tuesdays, the day that you buy a flight or whatever the latest hack is to beat the pricing algorithms. Yeah. Like our prospects have like a single snapshot moment in time that they experience us where they said, yeah, I think this makes sense. Mm-hmm. So pricing's, it's all a guess, right? And there's probably like a $50 float in rent based on how good the leasing agent was.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair estimate.
Especially once you get over like $1,300, right? Like there's between like $1,449 and $1,499 to that person is nothing, right? Yeah, like if they're going to rent that apartment, they're going to rent that apartment either way.
Right.
And we get so trapped into like their averages. It's like, no, we just push, and then we can come down, and then we can push what revenue management was supposed to do for us, and kind of did, but
that's right. Well,
those are hopefully. Being someone who's like knows nothing about tech, I've decided I'm going to be able to build and ship 4 products in a year.
I love it.
But I actually think I might be right. We'll see. AI's all sorts of stuff to do. You can hack front ends with Discord, and like you don't have to actually build. Anyway.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I want to have you back for round 2, 3, 4 as you start to release things into the marketplace. But in the meantime, I want people to know where they can find out more from you.
Yeah, so we have a website. I'm a big fan of the new TLDs, like the .AIs, and I went on a .apartments buying spree in 2021.
Yeah, I did that.
Actually, I have syndicate.apartments, which I love. I think that's a great domain. I don't do anything with it. I'm just waiting for someone to offer me $1 million or something for it.
Yeah, that's right.
But I bought all these like .apartments. So I bought the top 50 markets. I let some of those lapse, but I have chasingtomorrow.ai, so no .com, .ai. My website's awful, so go look at it and laugh at me for how terrible it is. But that's because we don't have any but right now LinkedIn's probably the best source.
Sure.
And we got like I said, a lot going on. I've found some really interesting, cool people to partner with and work with on getting some of these products out. But then also shameless plug. If you work in PropTech and you're a great engineer, preferably who like is fascinated by AI, not necessarily like an AI ML person, but knows Python like extraordinarily well. I am looking for amazing engineers who want to build software like it's 2024, and not like it's anytime previously.
Yeah.
Because the tools and the resources we have available to us it's just different.
That's right.
And the creative generalist in that space, I think, is like a really interesting role to where you have AI to like lean on stuff for like the knowledge that you used to spend 20 years to gain, and you just have to be a good problem solver and kind of understand the fundamentals of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't understand the fundamentals, which means I get stuck on the stupidest crap when I'm trying to write code that like a 7-year-old would have found. Like it stumps me for 3 days or like a week. But the fact that I can build prototypes that work, and I hadn't written code since like 1995. It was like HTML. So this would be like 97, 98.
Yeah.
Very early internet. Back when we were like burning CDs. And I think that was on GeoCities, which this is for all the old people listening, like Mike and I, who actually remember what those things are. I hadn't written code in 25 years, and even then, it was not relevant code, right? And the fact that I've been able to use these tools to build stuff is kind of wild, and not like no code build, but actually like write the code, have it work mostly, and
Yeah.
it's just I think we're at a very interesting time where I think every company is obviously going to get impacted, every business is going to get impacted by AI, but I think it's really hard to overstate how big that's going to be.
Yeah, it is.
And just in terms of what it allows us to reimagine in terms of like job functions and the way things are built, and whether that's applying to multifamily or software development. This is I feel very lucky to like not be 20 right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I'm 40. I've worked like some real jobs. I've worked with some brilliant people. I've learned a ton. I failed a lot, right, which was great because that's how you get better.
That's right.
And I'm like equipped now to actually try and take advantage of this. And I don't know. I could be. Well, I know I'm crazy. I am definitely crazy, but I might be crazy like a fox. And we will see. Or I might just be crazy, and that'll be the top thing. So we'll find out.
Well, I think you fit the ad that Steve Jobs put out there in the world. I can't remember the punchline, but maybe you're the crazy ones that go out and actually do stuff. I can't remember how the tagline goes, but it comes to mind for me when you say that. So,
well, you have to. You just have to be willing to ask why.
Yeah, that's right.
And really interrogate the answers as to actually why. And that's first principles thinking or systems thinking, like whatever you want to call it. But it's really just let's get it down to its individual pieces. Like I have a Trello board I made in 2019. That's all the tasks and functions needed to operate a property. It's like 200 something of them, like all individual, like at the atomic level. That I built when I was trying to reimagine the job roles, and I like put them all on Post-it notes, not on a Trello board, but it was just trying to like, all right, what makes sense to go together, what makes sense to not go together, and then what do I end up with, as opposed to having like with centralization of like we're replacing the assistant manager. Well, I don't think you actually have like a full visibility into what that role is and like what also trickles out on the sides.
Right,
that's why people are struggling with it. Because you can't replace the assistant manager. That's the old archetype. You have to build a new archetype. So anyway, I know we're out of time, and I go downhill.
No, listen. That's why I think we come back for I might even make this a 2-part episode, and then we'll do some future episodes, because I think when I met you at Blueprint for the first time in person, we had a conversation. Well, first it was prefaced by this conversation we had at a roundtable that you mentioned early on. Dom Beveridge hosted, and I was very impressed by the remarks that you made about the questions that were asked. And then we had a follow-on conversation, I think, in the hallways of Blueprint. And I was just super impressed by the way you think about the business. And I think as you start to manifest those ideas into real world products that'll make an impact on our industry, it's just, I'm fascinated. I want to keep track of what you're doing. I think it'll be valuable.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And it just comes from having no hobbies.
This is your hobby.
I literally, I joined Roscoe in 2008. In 2010, my job was systems and training and like how to give people time back. And basically from then on, it's all even in biz dev, it was like I was talking to owners about what they could. It's always my brain's always been there. And again, it's maybe that lucky timing thing, but it's just anything you think about a lot, right? Like you eventually find, Cal Newport has a great book called Deep Work on this, where you just put intention into it, and it's the human brain's an amazing thing, like what it ends up surfacing sometimes. It's like, oh, that's did I write that? Like, that was really good. Who wrote this? Like, like come back like weeks later, like that was not me. It's like that was you in that moment, right, in that flow state. So but no, I really appreciate you, Mike. I appreciate you highlighting kind of, I think we said at the beginning, my goal with this is just to bring attention to, I know I don't have all the answers. The only way we're going to actually find the answers is by more people acknowledging that these problems exist.
That's right.
And then getting together to actually figure out ways to solve them. And there's probably multiple ways to solve it.
I agree with that also.
So, but no incumbent really sticks around through real disruption. A couple, maybe a little bit, but there's a bunch of companies out there that need to be pouring a lot of energy into this, because otherwise they're going to end up getting clipped off when someone does figure it out. So
that's exactly right. Well,
awesome.
It has been an absolute pleasure. For everyone else, we'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you, Mike.